That's bad.
The other day I was talking to someone and the point got brought up that back in the day, like 8-10 years ago on forums like LS1 Tech, performancetrucks.net, they used to be adamant that you could not boost a stock bottom end LS. And then that eventually changed to, well, you can, but you can't make more than 500-600 horsepower at the crank, or otherwise those things will just turn to glass and shatter. And then it feels like almost weekly on Instagram I'm getting messages where people are asking advice on their builds and, you know, like general recipes on what they should do to do X, Y, and Z. So I thought I'd take a second to use Jack Black, our 1500 twin turbo LS street truck. Let's be real. That thing's a gutted mess nowadays. Anyway, I thought I'd use that as an example of the things you can do and the power you can make for honestly not really a whole lot. Not that this truck is anything special, which is kind of the point of it. A lot of it is creative laziness, we'll say. So to start off, I'd say to me, the most important parts when you're doing a turbo LS build, really any build, but in this case we're talking turbo LS, and you're trying to kind of not really maximize the entire build, but you're trying to be as effective as possible. The most important things, good EFI system, being able to control everything. Obviously, I'm partial to the Holley, but there's others out there, Mega Squirt, Micro Squirt. The Aces EFI, I've looked into that a lot. I really want to use that on the Fiero here. Phytech seems to be hit or miss. You know, there's a lot out there. But a good management system. 2, assuming you're automatic, I mean, most of us are going to be like 4L80 or Turbo 400, Power Glide, maybe some 350s. But a good torque converter. It is astounding the difference that a good torque converter can make. And then number 3, right behind that, is a good transmission. Those, I think, are the most important parts of a turbo LS build. And 2 of them have nothing to do with the turbo LS part. Because unless you're trying to make above 4 digits horsepower, they sincerely do not need. Want versus need is a thing that a lot of people mix up. They do not need a whole lot. Camshaft, sometimes intake, you don't need a good intake, the stock truck intake or like a TBSS intake, things like that. The LS6 intake, LS1 intakes are good, but the LS6 just performs better, and that's kind of it. Like the cam is the biggest thing. The heads on an LS are very, very, very good. Even the 706 A62 heads on like the 4H53s that you can get out of a junkyard for $15, they're very good. Especially if you're going from a more basic, mild, small block Chevy to an LS, you'd be very surprised at how good the factory untouched heads are. Now, going back to using Jack as our example here, we took that to the dyno over the summer. It made 730 horsepower at the tires, which may or may not sound like a good number to you. Everybody's got different opinions. That's fine. I was hoping for a little bit more, so, you know, whatever. But when you stop to think about the build that truck has in it, it's pretty dang good. First off, that truck has a 5.3 in it, relatively small motor, like 325 cubic inches, 327, 323, whatever. And not just a 5.3, it is a bone stock Gen 3 5.3 that we didn't even gap the rings in. Like, it is a miracle that this thing has survived as much as it has, considering it doesn't have an intercooler either. So this one has the benefit, it is a Gen 4 5.3, which if you're not familiar with the differences between Gen 3 and Gen 4, structurally, it's just stronger rods. That's the main thing. There's also some differences in like the crank reluctor wheel, tooth count, things like that to me don't really matter. But the main reason people want Gen 4 stuff is because it is a stronger bottom end. So like I said, with the 5.3 and Jack, we never opened it up at all. Didn't gap the rings, didn't even look at the rings, to be honest. Didn't pull it apart to look at bearings, anything like that. It is untouched as far as like the rotating assembly goes. Obviously, we changed the cam. That is a Texas Speed cam. It is, I think, the dumpster fire cam. It's a relatively small cam, 226 duration, 114 LSA, I think 600 lift, which is, you know, relatively mild. So it's not a big cam by any means. Stock lifters, stock push rods, basically the only things done to the motor itself, cam, springs. That's it. And then it had those two turbos over there on it at the time when it was on the dyno. Those are literally eBay $250 turbos. They're 7875s, billet wheel, which I mean is probably true, but that's like $500 worth of two turbos there for a 5.3. And it was not intercooled at the time. It was going directly into a TBSS intake. So again, nothing special with the intake. You can find those on Marketplace for $100. As far as the engine and mechanical side of things, that's all it was. Two eBay turbos, a cam and springs, and like $100 intake. And it made 730 horsepower to the wheels. And then obviously you need a good fuel system that has a MagnaFuel 4303, I think, which it's kind of peaking that thing out. I was hoping that would support a little bit more, but it's kind of topping it out. And then for the injectors, we run Snake Eater in pretty much everything. I know that there's some people that don't like them. That's totally fine. Everybody's got their own opinion. For anybody who's kind of on the fence about them, I will say I have used them, if I'm including a few of my friends' cars, I've used them in 9 vehicles. 8 vehicles? 8 or 9 vehicles. And we have had one issue, and that was one of mine. And I sent it to them. They tested it, said, yep, send a replacement back. No problem. Like take this car, for example. This has 1500s in it. Brand new, straight out of the box. Just made sure to blow all the lines and everything out. Made sure to have a good filter in it. And it fired right up. But for anybody who is interested, we have a 10% off code using code Snydertron for the entire order at Snake Eater Performance. So realistically with the truck, the way it was on the dyno, we had $500 engine, $400 cam, $160 springs, $100 intake. I think the injectors were like $600. $1,100 is about what the Holley system costs now, but that, I mean, is a variable. You can go with whatever. Same with the injectors. $550 for the turbos. That puts us at about $3,400 for the engine and the engine management system for something that made over 700 at the wheels. Now, a lot of the people that are going to say 700 isn't that much have probably never even ridden in a 500 horsepower car. Let's keep it a buck, all right? It blows my mind when people are like, even 600s, that's such little horsepower. Like, brother, you will put that in a tree. Come on now. So just for comparison's sake, I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's completely opinionated. Whatever you want to do, that's fine, as long as your car's on the road. I don't care what engine's in it. Once the hood's closed, you can't see it anyway. So just for comparison's sake, let's say you were trying to build a 383, right? You'll find a small block Chevy for $300, I think is a pretty fair price. Although, if I'm being honest, I've been looking recently for a small block for the Chevelle, thinking I could just bolt it in and go, and they are not cheap anymore. Like even a fairly stock 350 is like $500-600 around here now. But let's say you found a 350 for $300. I think that's a fair price. As long as it's a complete motor, I would be willing to pay that. Then you're looking at rotating assembly. The cheaper ones I've seen that I would trust, I mean, there's some cheap ones for like $900, but we bought new cam and turbo and everything for the LS. We used intake though, noted. Let's buy mostly new stuff for the 350 or the 383. So a good rotating assembly, $1,500. I think that's fair. I'll look it up right now, actually. All right, so it looks like about $1,200 for an Eagle set. We'll say $1,200 for a cheap rotating assembly. That puts you at $1,500 total. And then flat tappet cam and lifters is $250, $300 on the high side for a flat tappet, I think. And then you're gonna want an intake. That'll be, let's say, another $300. So that puts us $2,100, I think. And then a good carb. Let's say you find the carb used, right? Because carbs are expensive nowadays if you buy them new. Like a 750 double pumper is like $400 or $500 for a brawler. So let's say you get that used for $250, $200. That puts us $2,300. And then nobody's going to build a small block Chevy without at least an MSD system. So a good distributor, let's say $100 again, even though I think they're more than that. But let's say $100. I think the Pro billets are like $160. So that puts us $2,200. The MSD box, new, those are like $400, I think. Yeah, the programmable 6AL is $490. So let's say $300 for an MSD box. Find that on Marketplace too. So it's roughly, an $800. Oh, I'm not counting the machine work either. Machine work's not cheap anymore. That'll be $200-300. So it's about like a $600 difference to either have a 4 to 500 wheel horsepower 383 or a 700 wheel horsepower turbo LS. Now, again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. It is completely user preference. All right. We clear? Build whatever you want to build, I think, is the most important thing that people get so hung up on. Anyway, back to the kind of recipe that we had in Jack. There's ways that we can make it even better that I think we could get closer to that 800 wheel horsepower number. One, better turbos. Like I said, these are $250, $260 eBay turbos. Sure, they make power just fine, but they are not efficient at all. Like the jump between those two turbos at, like, let's say $550 shipped, and this one VS 7875, I think this is a Gen Next or a Next Gen 2.5 or whatever, is crazy. I bet this one turbo makes more power than those two. For basically the same money. I think that turbo new, you can get it for like $600. And then adding an intercooler, because our IATs going down the track at the end of the pass, even like through the first 100 feet, it pegs the IAT sensor at 302 degrees. Just getting the IATs below 200 degrees would be mind-blowing, the difference. I think even if we were to add an intercooler with those cheap turbos, it probably would have picked up like legit 60 horsepower, maybe 70, with still those junk turbos. And then if you add in the better single turbo, it would have made over 8 for sure. And then, like I said, that has a TBSS intake, which is a very, very good intake. I think it's one of the best factory GM intakes. But if we were to put something like a Holley High Ram on it, it would have picked up a few numbers and a more optimal cam, because that's one that I had left over out of the RX-7. If we put a little bit better cam, because they're pretty much any LS cam is about $399. So like if you're going to spend the money on a stage 1 that's the same price as a stage 3 or stage 4, then you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of meat left on the bones of that 730 horsepower number that Jack put down. So to wrap things up, I don't care what engine you use, just get your car on the road, drive it, enjoy it. Anyway, I think we're going to end the video here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Maybe learned something. Probably didn't. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.